All right, if you remember back to lesson 7.1, we talked about exponential growth and exponential decay. And one thing that we wanted to talk about in lesson 7.2 is compound interest. And so at the end of the compound interest, you should be able to determine how many times a year interest is calculated based on the given terms, and you'll actually be able to calculate what that account balance is for your compounded interest. Now, before we actually get started, I want to talk a little bit about what actually is compounded interest. In compound interest, just to kind of pull a little bit of example, let's say you deposit $100 into an account, okay? And after a specified amount of time, the bank's actually going to pay you interest for allowing you to use their money. And so let's say after a time they pay you $1. So they deposit $1 into that account, and now all of a sudden you've made your account balance is $101. And then that $101 stays in there for a specified amount of time, and then they're going to actually pay you interest. And the interest that they're going to actually pay you now is $101 and a penny, or 10 cents. So what happens is this thing starts growing exponentially. And so maybe the next time, after the next time they calculate it, it's $101.21. And what compound interest is actually interest that's being calculated on interest. Okay, so you're actually now not only earning interest on the initial $100 that you deposited, but you're also earning interest on the dollar. Okay, doesn't sound like a whole lot, but after a while, compound interest will start exponentially growing really, really fast. Okay, and in the last one, you're not only earning on the $101, but now you're also earning interest on the $1 and 10 on the 10 cents. So that's how you get $101.21. So some important key terms, because the institution where you deposit the money could actually calculate your compound interest in a manner of, or in a different ways. If they use a daily method, then they're going to use 365 days. Weekly, they're going to use 52, because there's 52 weeks in a year. Monthly is 12. Quarterly is 4. Semi-annually is 2, and annually is 1. Okay, so make sure you've printed off the note sheet and you have those as a reference that you can refer back to them. Okay, all right. So let's go ahead and take a look at what the formula for actually compound interest. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, yes, the formula looks a little ugly, but when you're actually solving this, it's not too bad. So let's take a look at what these are. Okay, the A is going to be your account balance at the end of the specified time. So let's say you deposit $1,000, earning a certain rate, they compounded it at a certain amount of time. Whenever you're done and you're ready to pull that out, say it's 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, this is what your account balance will be after that specified time. Okay? P stands for the principal amount of money that was deposited, that first initial deposit that you put in the bank. R is the rate. And again, it has to be a decimal. Okay? So you're going to do the same thing we did on exponential growth. If the rate is 6%, you've got to move the decimal point 2 places, so it ends up 0.06. Okay? Now, here's a new term that we really hadn't talked about. N is the number of times that you're going to compound a year. So that previous slide that I showed you, okay, this one right here, if you're compounded daily, then they're going to calculate it 365 times. Weekly, they're going to calculate it 52 times. So those are numbers, that's why those numbers are really, really important, and we need to know those. Okay? All right, T is, again, the same thing that we did on exponential growth. T represents time in years. Okay? So if you need more time to write those down, make sure that you go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and fill those out and write those down. But let's go ahead and look at example number 1. It says you deposit $1,000 in an account that pays 8% annual interest. Find the balance after 1 year if the interest is compounded annually. Okay? Well, let's go ahead. I don't really want to do 1 year. I'm going to change this problem. Let's go ahead and change this so it's after 2 years. Okay? So, same thing. A is going to be your account balance at the end. So, P is our initial amount, and we're depositing $1,000. R is our rate, but remember, our rate always has to be turned to a decimal. So we're going to turn it to 0.08. N is the number of times that it's compounded. And since it's compounded annually, if you refer back to that one slide, remember annually represents 1. Okay? And then we've already got, then the next part of the formula is N, same thing. And T is the number of time in years. And this time we've changed it to 2 years. Okay? So, the rest of this is just a matter of plugging it in. So P is A equals 1,000, parenthesis 1 plus 0.08 all over N, which is 1. Close the parenthesis. And I would suggest go ahead and multiplying these. So N times 2, we get 1 times 2, which is going to be 2. Okay? And when you put this in the calculator, it's just like we did with exponential growth and decay. 1,000, parenthesis, 1 plus 0.08 divided by 1, close the parenthesis, and we got to raise it to the second power. Okay? The calculator is going to know that it needs to divide this first before it adds on the 1. Okay? So then you calculate it, and at the end of 2 years, if they compounded annually at 8%, you're going to have $1,166.40. Okay? So let's take a look at another example. Okay? It's actually the same example, but this time they're going to compound it. And let's change this to 2 years, because I'm going to show you what happens the more we compound it. Because you deposit $1,000 in an account that pays 8% annual interest. Find the balance after 2 years if the interest is compounded quarterly. So there's one of those key words. And if you remember, quarterly means 4. So our P is 1,000. Our R is 8%. But remember, we've got to turn the decimal point. So it ends up being 0.08. N is 4 this time because it's compounded quarterly. And T is 2. So when I input it into my formula, P is 1,000, parentheses, 1 plus, my rate is 8%, so 0.08, divided by 4. N is 4. And then I'm going to go ahead and multiply N times 2, so 4 times 2, which is 8. Okay? That tells me how many times I'm actually going to have, how many times they're going to calculate. So in 2 years, they're going to calculate my interest 8 times. Okay? So 1,000, parenthesis, 1 plus 0.08, divided by 4, close, and then I'm going to raise it to the 8th power. And when I'm done, it actually, because see, I have more opportunity to pay interest. So $1,171.66. Okay? All right. So the last example, we're just doing it again. So if we can calculate it, compound it daily, let's change it to 3 years this time. We're going to leave it in an extra year. I want to show you how we need to do this. So our initial A again, our initial P is 1,000. Our R, 8%, but remember we've got to move the decimal point, so I get 0.08. My N, compounded daily. Okay, so it means they're going to do that number for daily. It was 365 days in a year. And my T is 3 years. Okay, so A equals 1,000. 1 plus, my rate is 0.08. But I've got to divide it by my N, which is 365. Okay? Let me see if I can move this down to give me a little more space. There we go. All right. And you do need to go ahead and multiply N times 2. And if you multiply 2 times 365, you get 730. Okay? So it's going to be 730. Okay. And the calculator will be able to do that because this right here is going to be a really, really small number. And this is one of those examples where you need to actually let the calculator do most of the calculating for you. So we're going to type it in, parenthesis, 1 plus 0.08 divided by 365, close, and then we're going to raise it to the 730th power. Okay? And we hit enter, and we find out it's $1,173.49 as our. Okay? And all we did was really change. This one we did go an additional year, but it was calculated. Oh, wait a minute. There is a mistake. Let me start over here. Because we were doing 2 years. So my, let's go back here. This should have been 365 times 3. So this should have been 1,095. Okay, sorry about that. So let's start over. 1,000 parenthesis 1 plus 0.08 divided by 365. Raise it to the 1,095 power. Okay, because we're actually, remember, we got to take. We changed the years to 3, so 365 times 3. And so then we get 1,271 and 22 cents. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, this concludes, and again, I suggest that doing some of the practice problems and calculating compound interest. And then when you're ready, go ahead and do the quick check, and you're ready for lesson 3.